So we come to our second great figure, and we're going to move on into the 17th century with Samuel de Champlain, the father of New France. So Samuel de Champlain, you can see his date, 1574, 1635. He died on Christmas Day, 1635. Beautiful day. A great Catholic explorer, a geographer, a cartographer, a navigator, a soldier, an ethnologist, a diplomat, and a chronicle. So Champlain made 20 or 30 back and forth between Quebec and France. Not just Quebec, North America and France. Here is a map of his of some of his trips. Some of his trips. You can see in his first trip was in 1603. They landed into what is today Nova Scotia, Port Royal. You can see over here. That was the first trip over here, the island of Nova Scotia, Cape Breton. Okay, that was the first trip. The second trip, he explored a little bit further down the St. Lawrence River on the indication of Jacques Cartier, also, because they had the relation of Jacques Cartier. They knew what Jacques Cartier had seen, what he had described. Now, why did they, before I go into the foundation of Quebec, we are here, some background to Champlain. In that first trip, when he went to Nova Scotia, he was not the leader of the expedition. He was the lieutenant. In that expedition, you had mixed sailors, Protestants and Catholics. It's an important detail. It was very tough. They suffered a lot because of the winter, the harsh winter. They suffered with the natives. They suffered with scurvy. They suffered with also the proximity, proximity of, well, the Dutch were just about to come in Virginia, in the U.S. U.S. was also starting to be colonized, but they suffered also of disputes between Catholics and Protestants. Champlain saw that, and Champlain saw also the natives. He fell in love with the natives in the sense that these people don't have the treasures of our religion. They don't know our Lord. We need to bring them to faith. There were some Jesuits among them. There were 2 Jesuits among them, Father Coton and another one. But there was a lot of disputes, and in France, there was a lot of problems between Catholics and Protestants at the same time. And the Prime Minister of King Henry IV was Protestant. Sully was his name. He was Protestant. The king converted to Catholicism. When he became, in 1593, he converted to Catholicism. He could not have been the King of France had he remained Catholic, had he remained Protestant. So he did understand, and he did convert sincerely. And when in the early 1600s, he heard obviously the Spaniards and the Portuguese, they were sending ships all over the world. It was Asia, it was South America, it was Mexico, it was Latin America. So the French, they said, well, we'd like to send some explorers as well. And they chose the route of Jacques Cartier, which was Northern Atlantic. That's why they came over near Newfoundland, and they came to Nova Scotia, and they came down the St. Lawrence River. So, and then Champlain, in a subsequent trip, 1608, he was the leader of his own expedition. And he came and he saw Quebec, and he says, this is where we're going to settle, in Quebec. In Quebec. He arrived in Quebec on July the 3rd, 1608, and start building his, what is called habitation, his dwelling, his arriving here in the bay of, just in front of Quebec. So his habitation, which was a fort, which was his dwelling, which was the general store, and this is how Quebec City started. At the bottom of the hill. This is la basse ville, the lower Quebec City. Okay. There were 28 Frenchmen who stayed that winter in Quebec. At the end of the winter, there were 8 alive. The harshness of the weather, health issues, as we have explained. Canada was rough. 4, 5, 6 feet of snow, whatever. They're not used to that over there. Nevertheless, you might say, well, when the spring came, you probably went back to France. No. If I go back here to the map, you can see that in 1609, he went down there, this is Quebec, he went down to what is today Lake Champlain. He went with an expedition of Algonquins and Hurons to fight the Iroquois. And they won the battle because he had the first guns, the first arquebus, I don't know the word in English, first the ancestor of the guns. And the Iroquois had never seen this. And so, because the fights between the different tribes. So the Hurons and the Algonquins were happy to ally with the French, who had such great weapons. So he gave his name to that lake. But that lake was also called for a while Blessed Sacrament Lake, Lake Champlain. And then he goes back, 1608. So you can see he made other trips. If we move on to on a further trip, you can see in red here, he came down on another trip, 613 is in green, and 16, 14, 15, see the trip in red? So he came here. He went down the Outaouais River, he went to Midland, he went to the Great Lakes, he discovered the Great Lakes. And he wanted also to get to learn about the natives, the Hurons, in order to bring them to faith also. It's very clear, and here I will tell you, in 1614, just before leaving, so on the red expedition, you can see there in Upper Canada, which is this part here, he talked to the French bishops who were gathered in France in 1614, and he told them that this holy work may be blessed by God, we need at least 15 Franciscan fathers, Recollets. They were a kind of Franciscans. And secondly, we need 300 families per year with animals and with their tools, because our land was covered with huge forests, huge trees. How long does it take to clear a field? These gigantic trees, these oak trees and big maple trees, can be, which are gone now because of all these centuries of development. They were not fields like we have today. And so you have to, when the ship would come from France, they had to have food to last for 2-3 years. Because before you start clearing the field, they didn't have tractors, everything by hand, all cutting the trees, and they had to unroot all the roots, clear the field, and then start planting and sowing and planting and have enough for the winter. So he said that we need 300 families per year with tools and animals, and 300 disciplined men able to earn their lives at the same time as to defend the countries, like soldiers. So they were asking priests and quantities of people. The result, In 1615, they received 4 Franciscans, 4 Recollet. And the leader was Father Le Caron, who goes to the Huron, to Huronia. His Father Dolbeau goes to the Montagnais, and then the 4 priests, one stays in Quebec, another started working on the language. But these Recollets, these Franciscans, were meeting with great difficulties. But before we see what they did in the midst of their difficulties, so this is the habitation of Champlain, the sketch that he probably made himself. This is the monument of Champlain. Anybody knows where this is? Well, it's in Aurelia. It's written. Okay. It's in Aurelia. Okay. By the way, they have removed it right now. I was told, because we walk by this when our pilgrimage, and it's at the end of September, we walked there. The statues were gone. Apparently, they're restoring them. And you continue towards Midland, and you come to this place here. Have you ever heard of this? Caragua. Caragua, site of the first Mass in Ontario. They probably, according to historians, Father Le Caron probably said Mass on the way, although it was hard to say Mass when you have these portages. This is probably the first chapel they built, perhaps, or more or less permanent place, perhaps. Okay, but anyway, this is this monument, which is here. You can see Midland. You can see Aurelia over here, Midland over there, and you can see it's just a little bit ways outside of Midland. And this is the monument that I would like to visit one day. Father Guéguin took these pictures. Here's the monument commemorating the first Mass in Ontario, celebrated here at Caragua, August 12, 1615. And at the back, in the presence of Champlain and 14 other Frenchmen, Franciscan Father Joseph Le Caron celebrated the first Mass in Upper Canada. So this is not, I've never been to this place. So that's some place, when we go to St. Mary among the Hurons, we can go just a few miles away to visit the place where this cross is. Because if you're here, it's because of the Mass. You can see that Champlain had the chaplain with him, had the priest with him. He says, Father, please say Mass. We need the Mass. These Indians need to see the Holy Mass. I told you they were asking for 15 priests, 300 families per year. 10 years later, there were still in Quebec 5 families. In 1628, only 5 families, 5 French families in Canada. The hardships of Canada, the problems, the political problems in France, the difficulties with the languages, difficulties with the weather. The Franciscans, Recollet, had, it's not easy, and not every priest can pick up a language. I saw that in Asia. Some priests have a particular gift for languages. Like in Asia, world famous are the Dutch and the Belgian priests. They learn languages like in 6 months, they just learn a language. And they just pile up the languages, okay? And so the brother of one of our priests in Belgium, who is a translator, who knows 5 languages, he says, well, in my office we deal with 5 languages, but that's about average in Brussels. You have others who have 8 or 10 languages, and the people know them. So, Father Le Caron had great problems, and his priests as well, great problems adapting to the missions in Canada. In 1624, so they've been there 9 years, they don't know what to do. It's not working very well. And there's no, families are not coming. We won't be able to last. There's problem with Protestants in France. Although there'll be a battle again between Catholics and Protestants just a few years later. But in 1624, it seems that it's going to be a failure. It's not going to work. What do they do? It was in March 19, 1624. The fathers get together and they make a vow, or they make a consecration of that early settlements of Canada, consecration to Saint Joseph. Saint Joseph, you saved the Holy Family in great hardships. Please come and save us. And March 19, 1624, they made Saint Joseph the patron of the country and the protector of this newborn church. Cardinal Bégin in 1924, so for the 300 years of that anniversary, confirmed this. And he said, the tradition of the devotion to Saint Joseph in Canada finds its roots at the very beginning of our country, which was officially consecrated to him in 1624. The relations of the Jesuits reveal to us how popular this devotion was in New France. It was under his patronage that the evangelization of Indians took place, and it was usually the name given to new converts. They would call everybody Joseph. And the custom established itself so quickly and got rooted in French Canada, this is the Cardinal speaking in 1924, that until our days, that the custom to choose Joseph as secondary name of all the boys who are baptized. And now they've changed it. But already in my days, in my parents' days, my grandparents, probably some of you here, all the boys had Joseph, all the girls had Mary. But why Joseph? Because of 1624. The study of the pastoral letters of the bishops of Quebec manifest that the encouragement of the devotion to Saint Joseph is a constant reminder of the bishops of French Canada. Generation after generations, the bishops recall the people, especially in March, when there's problems, hey, let's go back to Saint Joseph. This country belongs to him. In 1876, when the French-Canadian bishops asked Rome, can we have Saint Anne as the patron of Quebec? We find the following note of the Archbishop of Quebec. We ask this without prejudice, however, to the title that Saint Joseph has since 1624, our Lord, Saint Joseph, spouse of the Blessed Virgin Mary, as patron of the whole Canada. So that's why Saint Joseph is the patron of the whole Canada. Saint Anne is of Quebec. And in 1915, anniversary, 1915, 300 years of the first Mass in Ontario. Okay? I think 2015, I don't think there was much, okay? But that little village that we saw at Caragua, it is in La Fontaine. You can type La Fontaine, Ontario, and you'll find where that on the map near Midland. So there was a big solemnity of the in honor of the third. Ontario celebrated the third centenary of the faith in Canada. A little French parish run by the Sisters of St. Joseph. So, 1624. The King of France then is Louis XIII. What happens after the consecration to St. Joseph? The Recollet fathers, they say to Champlain, who is the spokesman with the French king, he says, maybe you should invite someone else, another religious order who are more skilled in this kind of work. And that's how the Jesuit came in the picture. When? 1625. So a year later, there was the first arrival of the first Jesuits. June 19, 1625, John de Brébeuf arrived in Quebec with a Recollect father, and he came also with Charles Lallemand, with another Jesuit, Charles Lallemand. So St. John of Brébeuf arrived, and the Jesuits arrived as an answer to the vow of St. Joseph, the consecration made to St. Joseph. The first, so he arrived in June 19, 1625, and in the autumn, St. John of Brébeuf, we'll have a whole conference on him later on. St. John of Brébeuf goes, I think it was to Lac Saint-Jean, along the Saguenay River, and he spent the whole winter with the Algonquins. And in one winter, he learns the language. He gets the key to the language of these Indians. And we'll speak about this in detail when we talk about it. 1625. It's funny opening, but 1627, wars in France between Catholics and Protestants. There's a famous Battle of La Rochelle, which was won by Louis XIII, thanks to the Rosary. And in thanksgiving for this battle, Louis XIII, I think it's partly in thanksgiving to this battle. Another is in thanksgiving for his wife to have conceived a child. A little bit later on. Okay, there's two issues. One is this battle, but the other is the conceiving a child. Louis XIII will build Notre-Dame des Victoires, Our Lady of Victories Church in Paris. At first it was called Our Lady of the Victory in singular, and then it became known as Our Lady of Victories because there's so many battles. But the Battle of La Rochelle in 27 was a battle of a victory of the Rosary against the Protestant. Nevertheless, France loses against the Protestant in some of their battles, and problems continue. Okay, problems continue. I need to go back a little bit. I jumped a page here. The consecration of St. Joseph. What year? 1624. 1625, the Jesuits come. But 1625, also, the Pope, King Louis XIII, appoints a viceroy for Canada. So one of his men will be in charge of Canada. His name, Henri de Lévis, Duc de Ventadour. He's the one who, he was very much imbued with the spirit of St. Francis de Sales. His spiritual director was a Jesuit. And he will be the one who will found the Company of the Blessed Sacrament, la Compagnie du Saint-Sacrement, who will found Montreal. There, all these men will be part of, it's like a third order devoted to the Blessed Sacrament, but to protect the priests bringing communion to sick people from Protestant attacks. So like bodyguards of priests accompanying the Blessed Sacrament. And he was assisting, the Duc Henri de Lévis, Fontadou, was assisting St. Vincent de Paul. So we're talking about, you know, great men in France. So he was the one who sent the Jesuits, but also he's the one who, at the request of Champlain, later on will say, we must send only Catholics to Canada. So all the settlers who came were 100% French Catholics. We cannot have this mixed. We need to build a Catholic civilization. And he said, you heard of the company of the 100 associates, la Compagnie des 100 Associés. It was said, the first goal, to try with divine assistance to bring the people in New France to the knowledge of the true God. So, 1627, lots of things are happening. The Duc de Ventadour is helping, sending missionaries, wanting to send people, but they have a problem with France. And in 1629, the English come and take Quebec. The English fleet take Quebec. Champlain has to surrender. St. John of Brebeuf, all the settlers, except the Louis Hébert family, they stay. But all the settlers are taken from Quebec and brought back to England. But when the ship arrive in England, they're told, what did you do? Then France, there was a treaty. There was a treaty which, the Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye, which England gave back to France all the prisoners, all their possessions. And so when they arrived back in France, the King of England, when the English fleet arrived in England, they were told, why did you make French prisoners? We have to give him back to them. And that is, after this, Champlain organized another trip, and he came back in 1633, and that was the beginning of like an explosion of development in French Canada. And I will finish with this, 1633. So Champlain comes back, Saint Jean de Brebeuf comes back, missionaries come back, settlers are coming. 1633 is the year of the vision of, she's now canonized, Sainte Marie of the Incarnation. I'll have a talk on her later on. Christmas 1633. Listen to this. She's an Ursuline sister. She's in Tours in France. South of Paris, a little bit south of Paris. I saw in a dream that I was with a young lady, a lady of the world, that I had met, I don't know how. She and I left our dwelling. I took her by the hand. We made great steps, and she was following me. And after a lot of fatigue and lots of very hard obstacles which were coming our way, we arrive at a beautiful place, at the entrance of which there was a man alone, dressed in white, a little bit like the apostles are dressed in paintings of the apostles. He signified with his hand that our path was this way to go to our dwelling. And this sign helped me to reach a little church on the coast, a little bit up on a hill. A little church which on the left was pointing towards the east. And although he did not speak to me, that he was not only solitary, but he was silent, I internally understood that that's where I had to go. So I had to go to that little church with my friend. However, my heart was drawn with this little church, which had been shown to me by the guardian of this country. Because this man, she understood, was the guardian of this country. This is 1633, 8 years after 24, 9 years after. On this little church, the Blessed Virgin Mary was seated. And she held in her arms baby Jesus on her lap. This place was on a hill. And I could see a great and vast country full of mountains, of valleys, of thick fog that filled everything except a little house, which was the church of that country, which I saw as being in the middle of this inaccessible and awful darkness. The Blessed Virgin, Mother of God, looked at this country as miserable as frightening. She looked at her blessed child, to which, without saying anything, she made herself understood something important to my heart. It seemed to me that she was speaking to Jesus about this country and about me. And she had some plans about me. This was Christmas 33. 13 months later, January 35, she hears another voice, because she does not know where that is. It's like it's a dream, it's a vision, what is it? She says in January 35, she heard this, she says, "This adorable majesty told me these words, 'It is Canada that I have shown you. You must go and build a house to Jesus and Mary.'" 1635. She's a contemplative nun in France. She's a widow. She has a son who's, by this time, the son must be about 15 years old. And God is asking her to build a house in Canada. The story of Mary of the Incarnation is extraordinary, but it's from the very, very beginning of the city of Quebec. We'll see that when we talk about them. So let us conclude this evening. So these are the various great figures we will see in this series of talks. There's a lot to say. This is not going to be a systematic class of history. I want you to know some of these great heroes that walked these lands, that traveled, navigated our rivers. We will see in Quebec, Saint Mary of the Incarnation, Blessed Catherine of Saint Augustine, and Saint François Montmorency de Laval. Notice, 2 saints, 1 blessed. We will see in Montreal. So this is Mary of the Incarnation, arrived in 39. Ville Marie is 42, is 3 years later. We will see Jérôme Le Royer de la Dauversière, the man who had his vision about the island of Montreal. We'll talk about him. And how he organized the expedition. And he found this young soldier Paul de Chaumédé de Maisonneuve, who at the same time met this young woman called Jeanne Mance. Each of them have extraordinary stories. A few years later, so the first three are the founders of Montreal. Marguerite Bourgeois arrives in 53, and she will start the first school in Montreal in 53. Dollard des Ormeaux, we need to talk about him because it's an extraordinary story which is little known. A great Catholic settler of in 1660. Beautiful story, beautiful story. And a little bit later on, 1670, she died in 1681, we'll talk about Catrite Caquita, our little saint, Mohawk saint. So we need to almost one talk on each one of these. And we will also see the Canadian martyrs. I have 8 of them. I don't know how many talks I will give on them. Probably one on St. John of Brebeuf, one on St. Isaac Jogues, and one regrouping the others, although they deserve one each. But some of them we don't know so much. And then there'll be other talks. I'd like to give one talk on St. Mary among the Hurons. The origin, the role of that village, how it worked, how it operated. And then we'll move on at the end of the our series of talks, if you're still among us, okay? I would like to give a talk. It's more the 19th century, is on the OMIs, because Ottawa, Bytown, was founded, or the first bishop in 1847, okay, was an OMI father. And if the OMI came here and then went west, it is thanks to Bishop Bourget, Bishop of Montreal, in the 1840s, a saintly bishop. He's the one who built Notre Dame in Montreal, l'église basilique Notre Dame. So these are the talks I would like to give in the coming months. We'll try to do twice a month because, as you can see, there's a lot of material. And so I encourage you to read about them. Maybe in the next 10 months, pick up some books of Canadian history, pick up the lives of these people if you want, do some searches online. If you want all their names, we will give you the names. We will put these talks online, video and audio, so you can re-listen to them if you want, and tell others who are not here today about them. But let me conclude, what I want you to understand is precisely that this part of Canada, Lower and Upper Canada, was evangelized by saints. There's a whole legion of saints and extraordinary lives. That period from 1630 to 1660, anybody know what it's called? Okay, they call it l'épopée mystique, the mystical era, because a lot of these people also had a mystical life. And when I give you the stories which are proven from different sources, they're real stories. These are real things. Okay, so there's a lot to say about these things, and so we owe them so much. So let us appreciate these people who brought the faith here, who died for us. They gave their life. They spent these winters. They were eaten alive by zillions of mosquitoes, okay? And they were offering it up for the people of this land. And so we are these people. And so let us understand what they did. Let us appreciate what we have. And let us also pray and sacrifice ourselves for the next generations. Thank you very much.